As allegations against Prince Andrew continue to emerge, should he be formally stripped of his titles? Hello, I'm Vicky Young and welcome to Politics Live. Joining me today, Labour MP Rosie Writing, Shadow Cabinet Minister Alex Burkhardt and Naomi Smith from Best for Britain.
It didn't work and we need to build new, closer ties with Europe to enable small businesses in particular to be able to trade fluidly with Europe once more.
Plenty of businesses do, but is the Chancellor right to blame Brexit for our sluggish economy?
I'm absolutely going to meet that 1.5 million target, and it will make the celebration all the sweeter if people are telling me that I can't do it. Of course we can do it.
The Housing Secretary sounds very confident, but can the government really get 1.5 million homes built? If you've got a view about that story or any other, remember it's your BBC News, so we want to hear your voice. Get in touch using the details on screen now. Now, Prince Andrew is on many of the front pages of the newspapers today. Let's have a look at some of those headlines. This, of course, comes after he agreed not to use his titles, including Duke of York. He, of course, remains under scrutiny over his friendship with the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein and more allegations, which he denies in a book by Virginia Giuffre. She alleged that she was made to have sex with Prince Andrew. Let's now speak to Stephen Flynn. He is the Westminster leader of the SNP. Thank you for speaking to us today. Now, Prince Andrew has agreed not to use his titles. Does that go far enough for you?
I mean, no. And of course, it shouldn't go far enough. It won't go far enough for Virginia Giuffre's family, who are angry and aghast. It won't go far enough for the public, who similarly are angry and aghast. And they deserve to know that some of the politicians are angry and aghast too, because what we have here is a member of the royal family telling the public in 2019 that they'd broken off all contact with Jeffrey Epstein, the known paedophile, and then a matter of just a few weeks later saying, "Oh, I can't wait to play with you some more again." This is outrageous. It's repulsive, and we can't have a situation where essentially it said he won't use these titles, but he still has them. And I listened to Ed Miliband on the television yesterday, who said that this is a matter for the royal family and his government's actions will be guided by what the royal family say. That's not good enough. We should take that out of their hands. There should be an act of parliament which strips Prince Andrew of his title, just as Peter Mandelson should be stripped of his title too. I'm happy to support that. More politicians need to say that too.
And do you think there are more of your colleagues in the House of Commons who would want to do this?
Well, there has to be, surely. I mean, how can any sane person look at this and know that someone who holds that profound position of importance in our constitutional society and is basically saying to a known paedophile, "Please still be friends with me, let's play some more," despite knowing everything that he's done? He solicited sex with a minor, for goodness sake. This is appalling. And the fact that more politicians aren't willing to speak out on this terrifies me slightly. We need to see the government bring forward an act of parliament to remove the title from Prince Andrew, a title which should also be removed from Peter Mandelson because he remains a member of the House of Lords, despite him supporting Peter Mandelson, despite him supporting Jeffrey Epstein, despite knowing that he was a convicted paedophile as well. And only then will we maybe get some trust back in our politics.
OK, Stephen, stay with us. Of course, Prince Andrew vigorously denies the accusations against him. Rosie, do you think it's time to do more?
First and foremost, my thoughts are with the victims. And I think with the details coming out and this being rehashed over and over again, it must be so difficult for those victims who suffered at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein. And yeah, so often in this conversation we talk about the men involved and we don't recognise how difficult that must be for the victims. I think it's right that with the decision of the King that Prince Andrew gave up his roles, and in regards to him being a prince, he is a prince by virtue of the fact that he is the son of a monarch. But I would be guided by the King in any decision made there.
I mean, the thing is that he hasn't been stripped of his titles, actually. He's just choosing not to use them. And the point Stephen Flynn's making is that Parliament could do this and they could do it with a one-line bill. Wouldn't take very long.
I think it's important to be guided by the decisions of His Majesty and the King. And if backbenchers feel that is the case, there's forums, backbench, business committees or private members' bills where they could put that forward.
Stephen, what do you say to that?
Look, I agree with the initial comments here, and I think that they are important. All of us are probably should be extremely sympathetic to the plight that Virginia Giuffre had to experience, and it's impossible not to get emotional seeing the comments and reflections of her family. But I'm sorry to hear a politician in Westminster basically say, oh, he's given these titles up. No, he's not. They're still his titles. They're in abeyance. The only way to remove them is through an Act of Parliament. The government could today put down a one-line bill that removes those titles from Prince Andrew. And I just cannot, for the life of me, understand why anyone reading any of this, who's watched the footage of Prince Andrew in the past, lied to the nation. Everyone on these isles has been lied to by this man, and say that's okay because it's not within our gift. It is within our gift. We're elected to Parliament to make the law. Let's make one that removes his titles and Peter Mandelson's.
Alex, what do you say to that? A one-line bill, it wouldn't actually take that long. The point being made here is that Prince Andrew hasn't given up any titles. He's just choosing not to use them.
Yeah, I agree with some of the things that both Stephen and Rosie have said, and obviously, thoughts with people who've been subject to abuse. But I think, notwithstanding what Stephen said, there's sort of proper order to go through in cases like this. I understand that some of the allegations, very, very serious allegations, are being investigated by the police. I think we let that run its course and then we see what things look like at the end. So, I think we just do everything in its proper term. Do you think,
go on, Stephen.
I listened to Alex and his colleagues in the House of Commons just a matter of weeks ago in respect of Peter Mandelson. It called for him to be removed from the House of Lords, called for his title in the House of Lords to be removed, to remove his salary, and yet it's different for Prince Andrew. In what world is this acceptable? Why are we just shrugging our shoulders here?
No one's shrugging
We're
their
elected
shoulders,
to Parliament to take action. Take action, Alec.
The police have got an investigation going on.
You've seen the emails yourself.
Just let them do it.
You've seen the emails.
Yeah. It's all right, all in good time. Just like one thing follows another. Just wait for proper process to be followed.
So, Alex, it sounds like you're not ruling out the possibility that MPs might go further.
We got to see what the police have to say.
Naomi?
Well, it's clear that his big brother has not got the patience for his behaviour that his mother had. And Prince William has made it pretty clear that when he eventually inherits the throne, he'll cut him loose entirely. And I agree completely with Rosie. We often forget about the victims of Jeffrey Epstein and his associates in this discussion. But so too must we think about the taxpayer. The taxpayer's been funding this guy. It is not only those who suffered deeply at the hands of Epstein and his associates. We're all paying the price for this poor behaviour. And it is high time that we look at all of that. And I think there are questions to be asked of the entire family. Who knew what? When did they know it? And how long have they been complicit in covering up his poor behaviour? Anyone listening at home is surely thinking, are we seriously still paying for this guy? So, yeah, he should be stripped of his titles, but I think we need to have a fundamental look at how the taxpayer is funding the wider civil list.
And, Stephen, do you think that MPs need to look into that a bit more? I mean, I think that Prince Andrew hasn't had any public money since 2019 when he stood down from his public duties, but it's not entirely clear.
Well, what's not entirely clear is the £12 million that was paid to Virginia Giuffre, where that money came from, whether there was any taxpayers' money associated with that. We've never had any transparency.
Yeah, that was the out-of-court settlement, wasn't it, as
yes,
part of
indeed.
the
When
civil sexual assault
so,
case?
so you might have not had money directly, but you very much could have received money indirectly. I think politicians in Parliament have a responsibility here to respond with the same anger that the public are expressing at the fact that that a man in the royal family has sought to retain such a relationship with a convicted paedophile, and the fact that I'm listening to a Labour and Tory politician saying "not my problem just now" just is abhorrent and not acceptable.
So is there anything that you can do next? Because obviously it's on the front pages of most of the newspapers, it's being debated on programmes like ours. Would you instigate a parliamentary debate? I think MPs are not allowed to talk about the royals, isn't that right? Oh, I think we might have lost the feed there. Rosie, you're going to come in there.
Yeah, that's not what the comment Stephen made. That's not what I was insinuating at all. But I also do think when we talk about this, so often we do not talk enough about making sure that there is not a world where this victims of this scale went so long without feeling as though they could come forward or be believed, and that they dealt with that level of violence. I want to see us talk a lot more how we can prevent this ever happening again and really stopping violence against young women and girls.
Naomi, I mean, everyone would agree with that, but in terms of Prince Andrew, do you think MPs should start debating this more?
There are so many issues facing this country right now, and so little parliamentary time to get through all of it, that I will leave it to the politicians in my company to make that judgment call. But as I said, what is evident is that here is a man who has been taxpayer funded, who has had an enormous amount of privilege and has used his power to abuse that privilege, and there are very serious allegations hanging over him with regard to Virginia Giuffre, and also revelations this weekend that he used his security detail to try and dig up dirt on Virginia Giuffre, and they are of course taxpayer funded. So I think we've got a very big constitutional issue to be looking at that extends far beyond this, and of course first and foremost should be in everybody's minds the victims of Epstein and his associates.
I mean, Alex, are you concerned that MPs might be actually out of touch with what the public are thinking about this, the anger that they feel towards Prince Andrew?
Look, I'm sure that there is a lot of anger out there, but as I say, we have a police investigation going on as far as I'm aware, and we should let that do its work. And I think before everyone sort of starts leaping to the response, we just, we let the police do their work.
OK, and thank you to Stephen Flynn as well. Unfortunately, we did lose the line to him, but thank you very much for speaking to us about this issue today, and I'm sure it's one that we will come back to. Now, have a look at this story. This says that the Chancellor is saying that the Brexit deal caused long-term damage to the economy. Now, this is a change in strategy and a change in approach, really, from the government, starting to say that actually, in terms of Rachel Reeves, the quote is that the UK's productivity challenge has been compounded by the way in which the UK left the European Union. Now, some businesses have been in touch with this about that. Let's have a listen to a couple of them.
We as a small business in particular have suffered. We lost all of our European trade from the 2021 transition period, and we've been trying to claw back small semblances of what we once had. The free trade to and from Europe was completely decimated by paperwork, bureaucracy and extra costs. So it's good that the government are finally standing up and recognising and saying what we all know, that it didn't work and we need to build new, closer ties with Europe.
Brexit has been really challenging for two main reasons. First, the costs have gone up considerably, in particular logistics costs. Anything from sending a large pallet of popcorn to a small individual parcel to a consumer now has administrative charges levied on it, and that has made it very difficult and costly for us to trade with Europe. And the second reason is because a lot of those smaller parcels in particular are getting stuck still at customs, whether it be in Germany or France or Spain. And so the consumers that are placing those orders for our gourmet popcorn aren't able to get them. They're being returned to us, and we're having to refund those consumers. That second point in particular has meant that our growth has been much slower within Europe over the last 4 or 5 years.
That's a view from a couple of our viewers. Alex, do you accept that Brexit has damaged the economy?
Well, I found it very interesting that you had two representatives of businesses who'd been negatively affected by Brexit, but hadn't got.
Do you have lots in your constituency who found it a positive experience?
Well, because as you know, and everyone here will know, this government and the previous government have done trade deals that have enabled trade with other parts of the world on a more fluid basis than we had before. And I perfectly accept that I've also had businesses in my constituency that have been negatively affected. But something that you very rarely hear is that the volume of trade that the UK had with the world in 2016 was about £1 trillion. It's today just shy of £1.8 trillion. And this despite of Brexit. So if you listen to some people, you listen to some shows, you listen to some presentations, the belief that you would hear is that it's been a disaster. It really hasn't. Some people have made money out of it. But the reason we're talking about this right now is because Rachel Reeves doesn't want to talk about her own disastrous management of the British economy. And this is another dead cat by the government, right?
Sounds like you don't want to talk about your bad Brexit deal.
I've just been talking about Brexit, and I'm now going to talk about Rachel Reeves. Since Rachel Reeves came into the Chancellorship, unemployment has gone up every single month. We had growth totally flatline in the summer. We have stagflation now. That's what businesses in my constituency are really concerned about. They're concerned about the totally disastrous business taxes that this government has put on, the highest rate in 50 years, the highest overall tax take since 1946. I was doing a debate in Cambridge last week, and the young people there, not right-wing audience at all, the young people there were absolutely furious about what this Chancellor has done to their futures. They are absolutely furious, and I completely understand why. Because you have graduates leaving this summer who can't find jobs in this jobs market, which has been killed by what Rachel Reeves has done. We now have business confidence at the lowest level ever. And it's nothing to do with Brexit. It's to do with Rachel Reeves and her shoddy management of the UK economy.
We'd love to hear from any businesses out there who feel they've had a positive experience from Brexit as well. The details are on the screen. You can get in touch with us at any time, of course. But look, the Office for Budget Responsibility is saying there's a £4 billion hit to the economy long term.
There's a £5 billion hit from Rachel Reeves' business taxes last year. There's a £5 billion hit from Angela Rayner's employment bill. Right? So everyone can come up with their own figures, but right now, the British economy has ground to a halt because of what the Chancellor did last November.
OK, right, I've got two people trying to come in here. Naomi first.
Well, I mean, it's fantasy economics to suggest anything other than the fact that leaving the single market has detrimentally impacted our economy. The businesses that we heard from, I have heard from thousands and thousands over the last decade that we've been looking into this at Best for Britain. And finally, what we're seeing now is political discourse finally catching up with the economic reality. Because for the last 10 years, we've had successive governments try to tell us what a great thing Brexit is, how it's going to supercharge the economy, how we're going to get it done and everyone's going to feel the benefit of it. Well, our polling done by YouGov shows that nearly 2/3 of people think that Brexit has been more of a failure than a success. Businesses know it's hurt them. Consumers know that they're paying more at the checkout, more to heat their homes and finding it more difficult to travel. It is, because we have become less trade intensive.
It's not why we have the highest inflation in the G7. It's not to do with Brexit.
It has compounded it. The word Rachel Reeves used was compounded. So Alex, just let me speak. You had a really good rant.
I'll let you have yours.
Thank you. Nobody is saying that all of our economic ills are as a consequence of Brexit. But anyone with any sense knows that Brexit has compounded each of those things. It's why the government is doing the right thing to get an SPS deal that should eventually help us bring down supermarket prices. It's why they're hoping to do a scheme on emissions trading to hopefully make it cheaper to heat our homes. And they need to go further and do alignment on a range of other industries to free up all of that trade friction that we heard about earlier from those businesses. It is finally the political discourse catching up with the economic reality that everybody knows.
I'd say so. This is what we call a dead cat strategy, right? So this is Linton Crosby, the great Australian political strategist, coined this phrase a few years ago. He said, when people are talking about the thing that you don't want them to talk about, you get a big dead cat out and you put it on the table.
And then Linton Crosby usually works for your party.
And then they end up talking about the dead cat. The dead cat in this case is, let's talk about Brexit again. Let's not talk about the massive failures of this government. When we had the election last year, this country had the fastest growing economy in the G7. Inflation was coming down.
From 11%. Inflation was down from
You'll remember why. It's because we had COVID and then we had...
And then we had... budget?
And then we had... That didn't cause inflation. What caused inflation was Ukraine, the war in Ukraine. I think you know that.
And decisions made by the previous Conservative government.
That's what caused inflation. And what we have now is a situation in which the economy has totally frozen because of the Labour Party decision, and it's trying to reheat an old argument. The truth is, since 2016, this country has grown faster.
It's not an old argument.
This country... I'll just finish this point and then I'll hand over. This country has grown faster than Germany, France, Italy and Japan since we left the EU. So if Brexit was this sort of big shocker, how come we've been doing better than all of the major economies in the EU?
I'd love to hear from Rosie, but I will come back to you on that point and answer your question.
In one sentence, you basically talk down our economy and then praise where it is now. But honestly, I find it really, really shocking and actually offensive to the electorate and to business owners that you can sit there and say that Brexit was this wholly positive thing.
That's not what I said.
That is the picture that you're trying to paint. That is not the truth. But Alex, you had a long time to speak. First of all, we've heard directly from businesses, but I worked in business at the time of Brexit. I remember staying up till 1 a.m. figuring out how I was going to move stock from the EU into the UK to protect sales ahead of a peak time. Like, this is a reality. People have spent money on paperwork, bureaucracy, manpower to be able to figure out how they're going to run their businesses because of the bad deal that the Tories had on Brexit. I respect the vote of the electorate and I respect the result of the referendum, but to sit there and not say that you made massive mistakes and left loopholes in our relationship with the EU, which this government then had to come in and reset, is beyond me.
It hasn't been reset at all. And if you see what's happening on steel now, you'll see what a failure your reset on Brexit has been.
I don't think
what the situation that we're in now is becoming much worse because of the choices of this government. What's happening now is that Keir Starmer is taking us into a relationship with the EU where we are a rule taker, but we don't feed into those rules. That is a dreadful, dreadful long-term setup.
And your government shut the door on having conversations with the EU.
We absolutely didn't.
Closest trading partner.
We had major conversations with the EU, a whole range of things, including defence and Ukraine. So to categorise it in those terms is absolutely misrepresenting what happened after 2016.
Rosie, can I just ask you, obviously you're saying that Brexit wasn't a huge success and that the government is trying to improve trade with the EU. What about going further? There are parties like the Liberal Democrats and others who say it's time to rejoin a customs union, for example.
Well, for me, I'm not saying that Brexit wasn't a success. What I'm saying is the deal that the Tories had with the EU was absolutely disastrous. And that's why we came in and have reset that relationship with our close trading partners. I'm not saying Brexit or the vote itself, the referendum itself was...
Naomi, do you agree with that? That it's the deal that was done rather than Brexit itself that's the problem?
Oh, no, I mean, I campaigned vociferously for Remain. Brexit was always going to, whatever shade of it, have a detrimental impact on trade. And it has. And when we adjust for inflation, trade has not grown. The UK has become a less trading... intensive nation. That is, well, I mean, look, it's that kind of fantasy economics that allowed your party to end up with a Liz Truss budget, and look how that panned out for you last year.
This is why
people don't take you seriously because they're feeling it. They're feeling the fact that regardless of COVID, regardless of Ukraine, they know that the Brexit penalty on top of those things is hurting us more. You asked about Germany. Germany is more exposed in terms of manufacturing because it is a larger portion of its economy than it is of ours, and it is more reliant on Russian gas than we are. So there are very different structural reasons as to why other countries... But what I would say is that the opportunity cost. Yes, our economy has is not doing well, as you have also said, but
Not
then
now.
you have similarly said it's been doing
Well, it was up until the election.
outperforming its competitors. Well, how much better would it be doing if we did have frictionless trade with our nearest, largest trading
So,
partner?
Naomi, do you feel that the government, are you disappointed that Labour's not going further in terms of reopening that?
I'm relieved that they're going in the direction that they're going, and I'd like them to go even further. But we now have annual summits. This can evolve over time. And also, I mean, Alex, you are, I believe, shadow brief for Northern Ireland. We know that Brexit has had a detrimental impact on GB-NI trade. I speak to businesses in Northern Ireland. I grew up in Derry. I go there often. You will not get many of them telling you that this has been great for them. And certainly, Windsor Framework was a good step change in the awful Boris Johnson deal that they got saddled with beforehand. But it's still extremely expensive. We are still seeing people pulling out of selling goods into Northern Ireland because of the extreme cost of doing so. So,
Alex, will you just answer that point?
Yeah, and look, obviously there have been particular complications that I'm not going to in Northern Ireland, which I won't hide from. But I will say is I go to Northern Ireland every 2 to 3 weeks, and what people are really complaining about there is the changes to national insurance contributions. It's been absolutely disastrous for business over there. So I know we're not going to agree, Naomi, but I hope you will acknowledge that there are some very bad things have been done by the Chancellor. I know that you would put a different emphasis on Brexit than I would, but I hope we can agree that what is also going in the background, if one was to accept your argument, so Brexit, which I don't, but what's also going on in the background is that we had some very, very anti-business measures introduced by the Chancellor last November, and there have been consequences to those too.
Well, what I can tell you is that in our polling,
would you agree with that?
Still saying that they would vote Conservative at the next election.
On that point, would you agree
that Brexit was more of a failure than a success? So I think for your own electoral chances, I think you need to be careful about defending Brexit as a success.
But just to be clear, do you agree that the national insurance contributions that the Chancellor brought in have been very damaging for business?
I have said, I think probably on this show, that bringing those in at the same time as welfare cuts was always going to be extremely difficult because the very jobs at that lower end of the jobs market that were likely to be offered to people coming off of benefits were less likely to be there as a consequence of employer NICs going up.
So it's killed employment.
I'm not here to defend the government's economic record. I'm here to talk about why I think it is correct to frame the budget as a Brexit budget.
I want to just ask Rosie that there will be some who, and Naomi is saying there, that actually rejoining the EU should be the ultimate destination.
I didn't say that.
Okay.
I didn't say that. I would never have voted to leave, and I campaigned strongly to remain. But I think we can go much further in aligning, not just on agri-food, not just through the energy trading scheme,
further than
but there are many other industries that need that alignment to take away all of that friction at the border that we've got at the moment.
Yeah, no, I agree. Again, I voted to remain, but I do respect the decision.
But do you think the government should be going further and reducing that trading
I think we should be
friction?
doing everything we can to build our relationships with our trading partners. Of course, that helps businesses.
And reverse Brexit?
No, like I said, it's a decision made by the public. But I am honestly shocked.
But you do end up then in a situation where, as Alex says and others will say, is that you are taking rules from the EU, aren't you? Because you're not at the table making those decisions.
No.
But if you want to have that, frictionless trade, you're going to have to take those rules.
No, that's not true. I mean, I think that we're building our partnerships and our relationships with the EU so we can work closely together on matters of trade, defence and security. I don't think that's just about us taking and playing by their rules. I think that's about collaboration so we can cut red tape for businesses. But honestly, I am shocked at how Alex, and this is why the Tory party is being seen as irrelevant, because you can sit here, we hear from two businesses of people say...
Oh, come on, I'll bring you 1,000 if you want.
Wait, let me speak, please. Let me speak, please.
Okay.
Please, because we can hear from two businesses, but thousands more. We all hear it from our own constituencies. I'll be shocked if you're not hearing it from yours. And your response is to say, no, Brexit is a wholly positive thing, and all these people who are in industry,
that's not what I said, because I'm sure you listened to what I said.
That is the picture you're trying to paint.
What I was shocked by is, given that the volume of trade since we left the EU has gone up substantially, however you measure it, it's gone up substantially, our trade with the world. It's a bit weird that the BBC put two businesses on who had been negatively impacted and none who had been positively impacted. Because given
I'm sure
that
we can get a hedge fund to come on and make a positive case.
Given that there has been a very substantial increase in our trade with the world,
one of your constituents,
I think we'd find somebody, wouldn't we?
We have in the past heard from And we've asked now for some.
I hope we will again.
We certainly will. And we've asked them to get in touch, please, with us. And you'll see the details a bit later in the programme. Now, Matt Chorley is going to be on Radio 5 Live in a little bit. Matt, what have you got in your programme?
Sorry. I'm going to ask the Schools Minister, Jackie Smith, why she now wants fewer people to go to university. We've got the team from the Americast podcast answering your questions on all things in Trumpland. And we'll hear from the Tory MP caught up in a deepfake scandal, a deepfake video which wrongly suggested he defected to Reform. So join me from 2 o'clock on BBC Radio 5 Live and on BBC Sounds.
OK, Matt, thank you. Look forward to that. And in the coming days on this programme, we are going to be looking at the Motability Scheme, which allows those with disabilities to lease cars at a discount. It's been in the news in the last few days, and we want you to get in touch if you've had experience of the scheme. All our contact details are on the screen. Now you can send a message or even a short video note. We look forward to hearing from you. Now, let's have a listen to the Housing Secretary, Steve Reid, who's going to be on Panorama later.
Of course we can do it. We can do anything in this country that we want to do.
If you fail to meet your 1.5 million target, Steve, will you eat your Build Baby Build hat? Will you?
Well, happily at the moment I'm dieting. Maybe the diet will be over by that point. But I do believe this very, very strongly. That target was given to me by the Prime Minister when I accepted this job, and I accepted it. And my job, just like yours or anyone watching this show, my job should be on the line if I fail to meet my target. So I expect to be held to account for it.
Well, that was the Housing Secretary, Steve Reid, and we're joined now by Dr. Abby O'Connor, who is an urban sociologist at the University of Sheffield. Thanks for speaking to us, Abby. You heard there Steve Reid saying he'll resign if he doesn't meet this target of building 1.5 million homes during this Parliament. Do you think that's a target that he can meet?
No, I don't think it is, and I don't think I'm alone in thinking that. I mean, on the show tonight, the Panorama show, you'll see people from all aspects of the house building world and the housing research world talk about that. I also think that when we have 172,000 children in temporary accommodation, a housing secretary focusing on build baby build hats and kind of making a joke out of that is quite tasteless. We know how acute the housing crisis is, and this government actually, to be frank, haven't done anything to really confront that. I mean, 1.5 million homes, whether they're built or not, is not going to help directly the 1.4 million people that are on the social housing waiting list, for example, or, you know, the 1 in 3 private renters that are in poverty after housing costs because their private rents are so high. Because really what we have is a lack of social housing and genuinely affordable housing in this country. And just building homes, however many they build, is really not going to help those people. I'm not sure who the government think is going to live in them.
OK, Abby, stay with us. Rosie, what do you say to that?
We have spoken quite a lot about prioritising affordable and social housings, 40% to be affordable or social, because, yeah, I think there's a housing crisis all round. Rent is too high. People my age think of home ownership only as a dream, and probably some of the biggest loads of casework that I have are people who are waiting for social or affordable housing. But the way out of this is to build, baby, build, and I don't think that's insensitive. I think it's recognising the problems that are there and making sure that we remove the blockers so we can get spades in the ground, houses built, and people to be able to have a home.
OK, Abby, what do you say to that?
I mean, firstly, I would say that the discussion of affordable housing is, you know, affordable housing is a fallacy. It was a Conservative Party policy. It's 80% of market rate. And when market rate is unaffordable, that is not affordable. I would also say that reference to the housing targets of this Labour government, well, last week, Steve Reid cut the affordable housing target for London. That's a city where we have 1 in 50 Londoners who are homeless, and it has the 3rd highest number of billionaires in this city. We have a fundamental problem of inequality in this country. And instead of the Labour government increasing genuinely affordable housing, which is through social homes, which, by the way, is really good for our economy. We know that if we invest in 90,000 social homes, it will bring £60 billion back into our economy. So it makes economic sense, but it also makes moral sense. So this abstract target of 1.5 million is not going to help the people that are on the streets, that are in temporary accommodation, and that are being evicted because of how high the rents are.
Rosie?
No, I disagree. I think that how we help the next generation, how we help those people on those housing lists is to build houses, and not just houses. We announced we're building 3 new towns to build communities, and accessible and affordable and social housing absolutely needs to be at the forefront of that. We need to make sure that we get people who are waiting for housing lists down. I can't speak specifically on the example you raised of London. I'm not a London MP, but I know in my constituency we have been building affordable housing, and I went to visit the new site the other day, and they spoke about the fact that planning blockages almost stopped the funding going ahead for that all-important social housing. We can't let that happen. The reforms to the planning system need to go ahead so that we can get spades in the ground and houses built. That's how I think we get ourselves out of this problem.
Abby, do you think the changes to the planning rules will make a difference? Do you think the private sector can deliver on these targets?
I mean, I think fundamentally the private sector is motivated by profit, right? So the kind of the concept that they will come in and save, the children living in temporary accommodation is one that I think is quite problematic. They are driven by profit. They've shown that. And I think it's interesting that we bring up the planning system here, because we know research shows that since 2007, there have been 1.2 million homes in this country that have planning permission but haven't been built yet. So that's not a problem of the planning system. There's a reason why they're not being built, and it wouldn't be unfair to say that that's because the profit margins aren't there. Construction costs have increased, inflation's gone up. But the fact is that that's 1.2 million houses that could have been built. We have 1.4 million on the social housing waiting list. That gap shrinks a lot, but we're not talking about that. I think what the government are doing is shifting the blame onto the planning system when they could and should be investing in social housing, which really was the foundation to the Labour Party, right? They've departed incredibly far from that. And, Rosie, you've defended there again these affordable houses that are being built, or houses that are being built, unless the people that are at the very sharp end of the housing crisis, i.e., as I said, the 172,000 children in temporary accommodation, are they going to be moved into those new houses overnight? I doubt it. And if they are, is that where they want to be living? Is the problem not that we are paying £70 billion of taxpayers' money to fund landlords because rents are unaffordable? That's the real problem here.
Right, Rosie, let you answer that and I'll bring the others in.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say the specifics of what will happen to all of those children, but what I do know is I didn't grow up with a lot of money, but I did have safe and secure housing, and I think that massively changed how I felt about the opportunities that are ahead of me, and to be able to go up to live a good and happy life despite not being from a wealthy background. I know personally how important having safe and secure housing is for children, but I do think whether it's the rental market, home ownership or social housing, the way out of this is to build more houses. And like I said, I'm speaking specifically about my area in Kettering, of which is a big population growth area. We are building a lot of housing, and I believe because of that, I will see constituents who are on the housing waiting list in Kettering go down.
Alex, the private sector, Abby says, is not delivering here.
Well, I certainly think that Steve Reid is not going to hit his 1.5 million target. I think that has been clear that the government isn't going to hit its target since they came into power. Kemi Badenoch was up against Angela Rayner in the House of Commons in July and said this, and none of the things that the government would have had to do between then and now they have done.
Why don't you think they're going to
something
hit
I'd
that
love to ask
target?
Dr. O'Connor, because she made a really interesting point about the reduction in the housing target in London, which I think has been reduced by 11%. Do you have, Dr. O'Connor, do you have a sense of why that's been done? Because I find it quite baffling.
I mean, we saw there was a leaked memo last week in which the housing minister said that if the developers are happy after the spending review, then that's a win for Labour. I mean, I think a reduction in affordable housing targets only benefits developers. We know that. It's about the fact that they want to have more market rate houses being built because that's what brings profit in. So clearly that's what's driving this government. And I think it's really interesting, again, just to go back to Rosie's point around safe and secure housing was the foundation of your life, as it was many people's. Then why aren't we focusing on that? Why I don't think anyone knows that many people that are able to both live in the private rented sector and save for a mortgage. That's just not possible right now. People are crying out for social housing. We know the benefits, but still we're told that the only thing that's going to solve this is building. And if I may, if we just looked at Manchester as an example, as a city, that city has built unequivocally for the last 10 years. Build to rent is their entire market in Manchester. And since 2015, rents have increased by 50%. And there's been mass displacement of local communities from the city centre because they can't afford to live there. That's the consequence.
Let me bring in Naomi here.
In order to meet his target, we've got some historical precedent from the last century to look at. The 2 times that government has been able to deliver this level of output in the supply of housing is in the interwar period, where effectively what you had was complete deregulation combined with municipal authorities doing the adjacent infrastructure. It's why we've got a tube line out into Essex, surrounded by green space because the Green Belt came in afterwards. The second time was immediately after Second World War, when we had major council house building made available because we were clearing slums and we were clearing up after post-war bomb damage. And that was an enormous amount of council homes being built. I think without that level of state-level intervention, it's not going to happen. The only part of the market where demand and supply meet one another is in the is in the prime and super prime element of the market. And that is not research from me. That is research from those notorious communists at Savills, the real estate agency.
Alex, state-level intervention. That's the only answer to a housing crisis.
But sometimes with housing, you do need state-level intervention.
So do you think that's what should happen now?
Sometimes you do. Sometimes, and that state-level intervention can come in a number of ways, but it can come through freeing up and changing the planning rules in order to make things happen.
But Harold Macmillan, he was the one who built all those council houses, didn't he? Isn't this an opportunity for the Conservative Party to
be proud of
go
its
down that road?
Well, yeah, you will hear the Conservative Party set out more detail on its housing policy in due course. Something that James Cleverly is working very closely on.
Not sure that abolishing stamp duty is going to fix the housing crisis, though.
So, no, but it'll make housing cheaper for a lot of young people, and that's a good thing. And
it's also for people already on the housing market.
Look, it's a growth measure. The truth is, you'll have more transactions, you have more people moving, you have more people buying services, and so it's an economic uplift
My other
measure.
concern with the target is that in desperation to meet it, we might see a lowering of building standards. What we also had in the interwar and post-war period was very high levels of building standard, and I would hope that whatever homes we are building for the next generation, they'll still be around in a couple of 100 years' time and not falling apart.
Abby, do you think that is the answer? Council houses being built?
Unequivocally. As I said earlier, I mean, it's both good for the economy and it's good for people in our society. I think also, Naomi talks about the interwar period there. That was, we were talking about time. We talk about times of emergency a lot. If we have the vast majority of children growing up in insecure housing, is that not an emergency? I mean, we're raising the next generation of people to work in our economy, to teach our kids, to work in our NHS. This is exactly where the state should be intervening. The Labour Party, as I said, can't have departed more from the founding principles of them. And I think if the Labour Party is so focused on growth right now, and yet they're ignoring the fact that investing in state-owned housing is part of that growth. If people aren't spending 60% of their income on rent, they might be able to go to their local pub or their local cinema or their local shops. They might actually be able to spend more money in the local economy. And isn't that what the government says they're all about? It makes economic sense, it makes moral sense, and it's quite distressing to see that the government are hiding behind abstract targets instead of actually focusing on
Rosie,
the affordability
what do you say to that?
housing.
Seize this opportunity.
I don't think it is an abstract target. I think it's how we end the housing crisis in our country. We've spoken a lot just now about developers as a whole. I think there are good developers and I think there are bad developers. And where there are good developers, we need to work with them to build houses, to get people off of the rental market into home ownership and off of council waiting lists as well. And I look forward to seeing the Tories announce their unfunded housing policy coming up.
Why do you think it'd be unfunded?
Because all of your other announcements have been.
Well, when you have a break this afternoon, go and have a look at what we said at Conservative Party conference.
Yeah, unfunded.
Everything was fully funded. Everything was fully costed, and you'll be able to read all about it on our website, as will everyone at home.
I look forward to that.
OK, well, that panorama will be on BBC One tonight at 8 o'clock. We'll be featuring Dr. Abby O'Connor. Thank you very much for speaking to us today and to all my other guests. That's all for today. I'll be back tomorrow with more Politics Live at 12:15. That is, of course, here on BBC Two and on iPlayer.
Radio 4. The more you listen, the more you see.